globalist-run World Economic Forum's vision for you and I to own nothing by the time 2030 hits, but yet still somehow be happy, may be unraveling in Canada much sooner than we thought. But here's the thing. The tool that's being used potentially to bring that to fruition may not be what you expected. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, where we promise to bring you the other side of the story. And this is one of those stories. In fact, you're not going to want to miss a minute of this if you have concerns or questions about what it could potentially mean to own nothing but be happy by 2030. I'm going to point out a law that you may have heard of or may not. When abbreviated, it's called UNDRIP. That stands for the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act. And of all the places in the world, British Columbia was one of the very first to get on board with it. The first city to go ahead and adopt UNDRIP in British Columbia is Vancouver, already pledging to prioritize housing for people of certain First Nations in Vancouver off of reserve land. The UNDRIP Act received royal assent back in June 21st of 2021, and the legislation advances the implementation of the declaration as a key step in renewing the Government of Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The purpose of this act is to confirm the declaration as an international human rights instrument that can help interpret and apply Canadian law. It also provides a framework to advance implementation of the declaration at the federal level. The Act requires the Government of Canada, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous people, to do a series of things. Now, some of you might be watching this and saying, what's the big deal? We're on unceded territory. Let's give it back. Well, the question that still remains is how much land are we talking about? And believe it or not, there's question about who exactly are Indigenous people when it comes to this act. I'm going to show you a little clip of an activist I met shortly after the world was told that 215 children's remains were found at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, something if you watched our documentary at kamloopsdocumentary.com, you would know has never been proven to be true at this point in time. But around that time, I ran into an activist who had this to say about how much land should be taken back from Canadians and given to Canadian First Nations.
It is time that Canada realizes that they are on stolen land, and it's time that Canada gives it back.
So how much land, and where would that land be when you say it should be given back?
All of this land.
So the whole country?
The whole country. I'm not thinking about other Canadians. I'm thinking about children.
But what about the children who don't have Indigenous heritage?
I'm thinking about our own. This is our land. This is our home. Everybody's just a visitor.
So is she right? Give it all back? Just a little? None? How much say do citizens really have in this matter since the law is already in action in Canada? Today, I bring you a sit-down report with a man named Ron Vaillant. I first came across Ron on a commentator show, Odessa Orlowitz, called Liberty Talk. And after that, many of you reached out to me asking me to do this story. And I think it's important, too, to shed light on this issue. Ron, he is a concerned Albertan who's been talking about UNDRIP for the last few years, and it's been falling mostly on deaf ears when it comes to our lawmakers in this country. You're going to want to hear what he has to say, but first I want to let you know if you appreciate these types of reports that we bring you, you can help support our independent journalism by opening up another tab on your screen and actually doing some Christmas shopping at our store called rebelnewsstore.com. There's lots of fun stuff there, and if you use coupon code Christmas, you can buy 2 shirts and get your second one free, putting lots of smiles on the patriots in your life's faces this Christmas. Let's hear from Ron. Joining us now, Ron Vaillant. Now, Ron, you have been sounding the alarms when it comes to UNDRIP for years, a few years. But now here it is rolling out quickly, especially in the province of British Columbia. So thanks for being on Rebel News.
Well, thank you for having me. This is the most important untold story in Canada, if not the world.
Well, I'm certainly not going to argue with you on that. It's quite shocking and concerning what I'm reading here.
Yes.
Now, I let people know in the beginning of this, the definition of UNDRIP, but I want to hear in your words what you would describe it as.
Well, UNDRIP is a United Nations document that's been 20 years in the making by the so-called experts on Indigenous affairs. And this is a book right here. And you can see this, not very thick, actually. So I would recommend people look at it. You can find it online, UNDRIP document. And I see it as a weapon of mass destruction for our societies. Because what it does, it's using the Indigenous issue, which people will acquiesce to, in order to create brand new rights, usurping power and everything over other people's. It'll be a two-tiered society. And when I was running in the 2019 election for the PPC in Northern BC, I was informed of this. And when I got this book, Article 26 is the one that stood out for me. There's a lot, when people read the document, they're going to go ahead and say, well, I agree with that, because it's kind of written in that kind of way. And but when you see the implications of how it all ties together, it's a monster. But Article 26 states that the Indigenous have the right to the lands, territories, and resources to which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used. And so what is going on right now, like BC adopted UNDRIP in 3 days after the federal election in 2019. And now Vancouver has openly accepted that. And so this is a very serious issue because all of the land basically in Canada now is being claimed. And that's through Bill C-15. But
I want to help people and myself wrap our heads around this a little bit more, especially the connection between the UN and what we're seeing happening. But also there was, some talk about Vancouver specifically, which is now on board, and maybe the previous mayor that left there as well. What do you know about that situation?
Well, basically, people can go onto the City of Vancouver's website, and if they look for the City of Vancouver's UNDRIP strategy, it's called Report of the UNDRIP Task Force. It's a PDF that you can get. And in there, basically, it states that the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples are the original stewards of the land. And this is on page 7. The City of Vancouver voted unanimously on June 24th, 2014, to acknowledge that the city is on the unceded territory of these bands. And the city adopted a reconciliation framework July 8th, 2014, stating that they are the bands are the rights and title holders of Vancouver land.
Yeah, so it's happening. Land is being given back. If we take a look at this article on the screen right now from Campbell River, this was based a couple of years ago. And that article says, British Columbians, you better wake up. You better pay attention because there's going to be some huge adjustments when it comes to giving land back. I can't help but think of the land acknowledgements we see all the time now.
Yes.
I know it's happening some teachers are saying it in schools. We see it in emails, all the politicians, not all. It's
everywhere,
Many of the politicians start their speech with it. And it's continuously saying we're unceded land, depending on where you are and who you are. And so I'm always thinking that programming is essentially,
it is,
if you're on stolen land, what do you do when you steal something? You give it back. So I'm not sure if these people who are saying this are really prepared to do what they're speaking out. Are they prepared to give their home back or to not will their house to their children because it's unceded? So
So let's talk
Most
about
just go along to go along, get along to, go along to get
right.
along.
People don't even think about what they're saying anymore. But let's talk about the UN here, because when I look at this, I see that the UN has its own rules, it has its own laws, and now here we are coming up with the UNDRIP and how we're going to implement it here. So what is the relationship between the UN and what we're doing in BC?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's very complicated, but it's very easy, actually. And one thing I want to mention there about the declarations, when they start meetings, if they're doing that in your community, the land has already been claimed. Okay. But anyhow, so the UN is an entity, made up of all these different countries. 50% of them are dictatorships, and they do not share our way of and our values of life. And so what they've done is created this instrument, basically, that is a weapon of mass destruction for our society. And the only way it can be implemented within Canada or BC or even Vancouver is if the politicians go ahead and forward it. And that's exactly what has happened. There is no MP, whether conservative or liberal. There is no MPP or MLA that I know of, or city council member that has given a warning like I have or others have regarding the serious implications of this document. 3 days after the 2019 federal election that I ran in northern BC, that John Horgan and his crew went ahead and adopted UNDRIP. And I see it also in New Zealand. I posted a video a year ago called Cross the Rubicon. That's his channel. And he went ahead and he talked about the Maori people there, and it was going on there. And he got absolutely crucified in the media as being a racist, lost his job, lost his marriage. And he said his life has been ruined on account of being this whistleblower. I think it's going on really in most countries in the world behind the scenes. Even in the US, basically, Biden is talking about having a new relationship with the Indigenous and stuff like that. And so you have to go ahead and look behind the scenes, because up until that point in 2019, when John Horgan went ahead and adopted it for the province, it was all hush, hush, hush behind the scenes. Right. And it still is, because no MP is warning us, not even Pierre Poilievre. Right. And they know about this. There was a standing committee in the for Bill C-15. That Bill C-15 basically states that all Canadian law has to be basically in alignment with UNDRIP. And that has already passed of June of last year. But I had private Zoom meetings with people, and one conservative MP, I asked, how come you're not warning people on this? And he was on the standing committee, and he stated that sometimes it's better not to say things. The other conservative MP, he said, it's a shame that no one knows about UNDRIP. And I says, you're the official opposition. I don't see anything on your social media or YouTube. And he says, yeah, but we need help. And if you go and look at any of these, Rempel or whatever, none of them are saying anything about this. It's huge.
Well, it's quite shocking to me. But you know what? It comes with awareness. We're talking about this. We're publishing this on Rebel News. So if you guys
I'm worn out trying to
have something to say, then let us know in the comments, reach out to your MLA, what have you. But what can be done? What can be done at this point for people who are saying, listen, I'm all for supporting First Nations, Indigenous people.
Right.
My own family is that, and I still have issues with what I'm seeing here. What can be done from citizens who say, you know what? No, hold up here. We can't just be giving land based on the UN and where does that stop? What can we do?
Well, yeah, it doesn't stop, because it's not just land. It's a whole bunch of other things. It's governance. It's reparation, like paying for the land use. It's not allowing military to exercise on your land, on their, the land. It's claiming the waters and the resources. It's just absolutely monster. No one's going to want to be able to do business in Canada when all of this is understood. And what's going to happen to the property values in Vancouver, for example, when people find out that the city itself has stated that it's the ownership is with someone else, and it goes beyond that with Vancouver. Like, okay, this is the problem. I've been talking to people and warning, and some people have been getting it, of course, but most people, they just think, oh, yeah, that's not, Ron's just exaggerating. But with the Campbell River Mirror article, that was one of the first things to come out that would show that it's actually going on. And now with this document that the city of Vancouver is working towards implementing, that's absolute concrete, bulletproof, documentation that is going on. So now it's that I'm glad that they went ahead and published that, because now people can know that this is really the most important issue that hasn't been talked about in Canada, And so I guess one thing is to get educated. It's not that difficult. Just go ahead and go and download UNDRIP document. Go and read articles 5, 26, 28, 30, 36. And 46. It'll take you 5 minutes to read those things. It's not hard. And look at it under the lens of, it's not just, giving a nice talk and a nice, acknowledgement. It's basically, new governance and new systems and the whole bit. So that's one thing to do. And share this information out, I guess. So we need to have mass awareness, because it's the politicians who are implementing this. So we got to bring the fire to their feet on all of this and get them to stop it. But it's really far down the line at this point in time. But it's still, we got to go ahead and do what we can do, right?
Well, speaking of being far on the line right now, how long would it take to roll out, the returning of land? I guess maybe you can't answer that. But how long do we have before we own nothing and we'll be happy is what I'm asking.
Well, this is actually a key wedge in that whole thing. And unfortunately, the Indigenous, at least the leaders, are being duped by this. And they don't understand that they're just pawns in the game. And ultimately, in the end, Indigenous is not identified in UNDRIP, even though the different bills that are made identify them as being Indian, Inuit, and Métis. I think in law challenges, because let's say Bill C-15, which is all across Canada, it states, 35.2 of the charter as being, Indigenous as being these Indian, Inuit, and Métis. But the whole thrust of the bill is that, all Canadian law has to be consistent with UNDRIP. So the non-definition of Indigenous, I think, will triumph. And so Article 36 talks about foreign Indigenous can also partake in the same rights as the Indigenous here.
Well, I have a feeling this certainly won't be the last UNDRIP-related report that I'll be doing, and perhaps I'll see you sooner than expected. Thanks for being on Rebel News.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Like I said to Ron, I have a feeling I'll be doing many more reports on this. And you should know I also reached out to the politicians that Ron named in this interview to get their side of the story and invite them to an interview about this. Make sure you're getting everything you need when it comes to answers regarding this. I'm Drea Humphrey, and I'll see you in the next report. Well, while you and I are still allowed to own something, I suggest you check out our store, rebelnewsstore.com, to see the fun items we have for Christmas and more. And everything that you buy there not only puts a smile on the patriot in your life's face, it also helps support our independent journalism. That's rebelnewsstore.com.